Begin by setting up your needles for a 1x1 configuration, ensuring that the beds are in full pitch. The carriages should be set both to knit plain at your main rib tension. Thread the carriage with waste yarn and knit the zigzag row. We don't need to cast on with a tight tension since this waste yarn edge is not permanent. Hang the comb and apply the barrel weights. Make sure that when you hang the comb it's balanced, meaning it doesn't tip up or down on the far end of the comb, and apply enough weight to satisfy the width of knitting. In this example, I've hung 2 barrel weights close to the edge where the last needle's in work. If you haven't already, hang a clothespin on the tail end of the waste yarn just to ensure that that edge stitch knits off properly. Knit about 10 to 15 rows or 1 inch of knitting before breaking the waste yarn. We'll knit a tubular course of ravel cord, which is the mechanism by which we'll separate the waste yarn. Hang a clothespin on the end of the ravel cord and set the carriages to slip in opposing directions, still working at main tension. Knit 2 passes or 1 tubular or circular course, manually feeding the draw cord into the connecting arm of the ribber. Make sure that when you go back for the return pass, you pull up slightly to prevent a loop from forming, in this example on the left side of the knitting. Drop one end of the bed and slip the bobbin through the beds, closing them back up in preparation for knitting in main yarn. Thread the main yarn, secure with a clothespin, and set both carriages to knit plain at tension 0, 0. Knit the new main yarn zigzag row and then set the carriage to slip in opposing directions and increase the tension to 1, 1. Knit 1 tubular or circular course, which is again 2 passes of the carriage, and then set the carriages back to knit plain and increase the tension to 2, 2. At this point, you would set your row counter to 0, 0, 0, and this would be row 1. In this example, my main tension is 5. So for the next 3 rows, I will increase the tension by 1 whole number before knitting the next row. This will grade the tension and make a more uniform start to the main yarn rib. Once you've hit main tension, continue knitting per whatever instructions you're following, whether this is a rib welt, a collar, etc. Off the machine, you'll be able to clearly see the differences between an edge cast directly onto the comb and an edge that's saved or secured by the separating row of draw thread or ravel cord. When removing the ravel cord, you'll need to pull a loop from the side that's opposite the ravel cord tails. You'll also need to make sure that when you're pulling the ravel cord out, that you're taking one leg at a time of the loop that you'll pull through and pulling through the edge that is not connected to the bobbin first. Sometimes it can be a little bit difficult, especially if you're working with a really wide piece, but do your best to avoid cutting your ravel cord. If you're using a nylon thread from a cone as a draw thread, cut it. Who cares? We've got plenty. But if it's the ravel cord that came in your kit, do your best to keep it in one piece.